The United States of America and world politics, what prospects under Donald Trump? Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Global Insight this day. It is often said that politics is domestic, but becomes of utmost interest to the world at large when the nation has a strong standing and its policies can have both direct and indirect effect on global economics, international relations, corporations, geopolitics, among other major factors. The election of Donald Trump back to the White House has occupied headline news all over the world, with pundits anticipating the agenda that Trump will unveil and how it will shake global power dynamics. We will be talking to our guest in the course of the program, still on the global implications or what prospects the world should actually await as we are waiting for the official start of a second mandate, or another term for U.S. President Donald Trump as the leader of the White House. This is Global Insight. Welcome to you, ladies and gentlemen, to this edition of your discursive, informative and knowledge-sharing program, Global Insider, on For You Media Africa. Today, we still revisit what is making headline news across the globe, the election of Donald Trump, a Republican candidate, as the next resident of the White House. And we're looking at what major prospects can the world actually await under this new administration of Donald Trump happening in a world that has undergone a whole lot of changes at every sphere. Ladies and gentlemen, as already announced, we'll be joined by experts or guests that will give us highlights or greater insight on the prospect that the world can await and how the Trump administration can affect power dynamics, not only in the United States, but across the global world. And without much ado, I'll take you straight away to India to welcome Purnima ANAND, President BRICS International Forum, and of course welcoming you with a question, madam, on how India welcomed the election victory of Donald Trump after the November 5th, 2024 presidential election.
Good evening, Clarice, and once again we are on your channel, so it is really wonderful to discuss today. We gather to discuss a topic that resonates deeply across the world, and especially in India. The victory of President Trump celebrated very largely and very in all states. People celebrated like a Diwali festival. So this prospects and global politics under a potential administration of Mr. Trump is now new scale for the friendship and new trade, and how world will take shape, and impact of US presidency often extended beyond its borders, influencing relationship, trade, security and global cooperation. So we will discuss later in your channel with the experts. So this is my intervention in the beginning, that this election is really celebrated by the people across the globe, because people are expecting that all disputes and challenges will be sorted out with the American new president.
Indeed, the expectations are high from every level, waiting to see what Donald Trump, whom some pundits have labeled as someone who is highly unpredictable, the agenda that awaits the U.S. and, of course, the effect that this will cause in Europe and elsewhere across the globe. Let's now go to Scotland to welcome KORAD REKAS, journalist, financial analyst, and and chair of the Policies for Independent Scotland. Welcome to the program. Of course, we cannot actually undermine the relationship that Trump shared during his first mandate with the Scotland, and of course, let's have an understanding of how the Scotland welcomed the election win of Donald Trump, and do you think there are major prospects that will characterize the USA and Scotland in this new administration?
I'm really honored to be here with you, dear friends, and thank you for another invitation. Well, speaking of links between Donald Trump and Scotland, I have to be extremely careful because a lot of my beloved Scottish friends consider that affair very locally. When Donald Trump lost his previous election, some of the Scottish newspapers had titles, South Ayr Golf Course owner lose the election. So these links are very direct, and of course a lot of Scots consider Donald Trump to be a local businessman. And of course, Scottish people are rather skeptical to the prospects of the future US policy under Trump because, well, we have to think that Scottish issue is a part of the global American strategy. We have to remember that in the fast lane, that's near Glasgow, there is one of the greatest naval base in the Northern Atlantic. It's used by Royal Navy nuclear submarine ships armed with the Trident nuclear missiles. But it's also the base which could be used by the US Navy just to lock the Northern Atlantic and to go directly to the Arctic Ocean and to give American nuclear power strategic advantage against the Russian Federation and China in any kind of global competition. Okay. So Scottish people understand perfectly that for the Americans it's absolutely crucial importance to keep Scotland together with England as the United Kingdom and to continue this kind of imperialistic politics even under the Trump presidency. We have to remember that thinking about Trump as equal to the global peace is just naive. Trump and his supporters in America means only another side of the globe under the war treaty. If not against Russia, it could be against China easily.
Okay. Thank you so much for that introductory phase. And we go to South Africa to join a Pan-African coach and chief coaching officer at CAMEROON in the person of Good News CADOGAN. Welcome to Global Insight this day. And what are your own perspectives about US and the world politics? What prospect can the world await under the Trump administration, which will officially kickstart on the 20th of January 2025?
Good day to you, Clarice, and good day to my fellow panelists and to all your viewers across the world. It's quite interesting, the kind of views that are held in Africa, in South Africa in particular, and across the world as we have been observing these results. I can say with confidence that in South Africa, Trump is not seen to be a progressive leader insofar as his politics is concerned and also his economic views, including him sort of taking America, even the phrase or the tagline, making America great again, is not seen in a positive light because America in the past hasn't been great to people who look like Africans. So there is that kind of skepticism insofar as his presidency is concerned. On the other hand, also in South Africa, we share a similar kind of bond with the Palestinians. And the American politics, insofar as the Middle East is concerned, is very much pro-Israel, which is not a great ally of the majority of South Africans. So in that regard, there is a view that he will continue to support Israel. And then in the rest of Europe, insofar as NATO is concerned, there is some positive light there in terms of how he's seen that maybe the war between Ukraine and Russia may stop as a result of Trump's presidency. So it's not all that doom and gloom if it's seen that way.
Okay.
But on a large scale, his presidency is prophesying a more internally focused presidency, a strengthening of domestic elements, like, for example, politics, economics. Some of the people in America may actually struggle because some of the problems that they have, even though he is promising heaven for them, he may not be able to deliver some of the promises because they sit at a structural dynamic insofar as the economy is concerned.
Okay.
If you take, for example, the issue of manufacturing and innovation against financial services and services in general being the main kind of contributor to the American economy. So the lower classes in America will still not be able to benefit from a Trump presidency because it's highly unlikely that those industries that have exported the manufacturing capacity will ever bring that back because it may be very expensive for them to have a drive of manufacturing locally in America.
Okay.
And take back, for example, manufacturing of cell phones as an example, back from China and back into California. It is highly unlikely.
All right. And those are some of the complexities that we are going to unveil, which we have started unveiling on Global Insight this day. We are moving now to the United States of America, joined by Dr. Eddie Eric, Program Officer at the Solidarity Center, Africa Department. We are coming to you, sir, with the question of the significance of the election victory of Donald Trump pertaining USA and global politics.
Yes, Clarice. Good morning, and hi to all the panelists in here. Of course, like any U.S. elections, there's always, prospects and visions of what whoever wins, which party wins, which personality wins will have in terms of effect on the global world. This election that just concluded on Tuesday also holds the same for the United States due to the U.S. global influence in the world today, number one, due to the current geopolitical changes that we have observed in the world. At least in the past 4 years, due to the ongoing Russian-Ukraine crisis and the Middle Eastern crisis, but also due to emerging trends that we have observed in Africa in the past 4 years at least, whereby French influence, for instance, has been drastically reduced by with French troops being ousted in some countries. We are also looking at the rise of the BRICS countries, for instance, and the doors being opened more and more in certain African countries for those emerging powers. But not only that, we also have the presence of the Saudi, Asian, Arabian, countries. We're talking about Turkey, we're talking about Saudi Arabia, whose presence in Africa, for instance, is also growing more and more. And this election and the return to power of Donald Trump is also holding its promises, and of course, opening door to a lot of questioning due to a certain number of things. When it comes to Africa, for instance, we are talking about the 2025 renewal of the African Growth Opportunity Act, which is the bedrock of the U.S., trade relation with Africa. And as we look also at the full implementation of the Continental Free Trade Agreement of Africa, what will be the position of the new administration coming in regarding that. So my predecessor, I think the brother from South Africa, also talked about, what the importance of workers in there. And I believe that these are all of the questions that from the point of view of the world, number one, but from the point of view of Africans, even living in the United States, we see the different direction that the Trump administration will take, as we have in our back, the back of our minds, what the previous 4 years of his administrations were representing the rhetoric. So we hope that we will have 4 more years or 4 new years of a peaceful rhetoric when it comes to dealing, at this international level. And Clarice, that's where I want to land, on this first question. Greeting again my co-panelists and seeing my good friend and brother Elijah, who just connected with us.
Okay, thank you so much for notifying. Welcome to you, Dr. Elijah ENOAKU, Director of Center for Africa Development. He's joining us from Canada. Welcome to the program. And of course, the question of the implications of the election of Donald Trump on global development. As a development expert, what have you to say pertaining this?
Hi, Clarice, and hi to my co-panelists. My apology that I'm coming a little bit late, and lots of things happening in the background. And this is a heavy loaded question, Clarice, and it will depend on which angle you're coming from. If you are an African, you're going to answer this question definitely. If you're an American, this question is going to be answered differently. If you are an Asian, you have a different perspective. Any part of the world where you're coming from, you are going to have this answer. It's a mixed basket. I'm going to tell you the truth. It's a very, very mixed basket. And there's going to be no single answer to this kind of question. So
absolutely.
Now, they say experience is the best teacher. He's been in power for 4 years as an African. Ask yourself the question, for the 4 years that he was in power, what was his policies towards Africa then? It will give you an idea of where he might be leading in the next 4 years that he's getting to power. So as an African, I can only speak as an African, but as an African living in the West, I could tell you a lot of things about what I think he might be doing in the West. But I think on this discussion today, we will definitely be talking more about what it means to Africa than what it means to the West, because, charity begins at home. I'm not going to be telling you what it means to the United States because, my people are Africans. I have to tell you what it means to Africans. As a development expert for African affairs, I will tell you more what that means to Africa than what that means to the world. So I don't want to take so much time on the introduction. I think we have a lot of time to talk about this. So thanks for having me today.
And of course, thanks for respecting the rendezvous. We were already into the discussions with preliminary questions. Let's come back to PURNIMA ANAND, President BRICS International Forum, trying to, when we look at the position of India, we saw some sort of jubilation from that part of the country, pertaining the election win of Donald Trump, recalling that India enjoyed a quite cordial relationship with Donald Trump during his first mandate as president of the United States of America. Can we say in today's world that, and under new Trump administration, if India will gain more standing, especially as the country alongside those of the global south are trying to define their own scope or sphere in global economics, politics, and other aspects of international concern?
Yes, this is very important in current scenario. And Trump victory is very important for India because we all know that during last tenure, Trump was good friend of India and he was cordially invited by Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and they are having very good understanding, and they were trying to develop good bridges between America and India. Then COVID came, and during first COVID day time, a very big delegation of President Trump came to India and they visited to Gujarat, and it was the biggest organizational program of Indian government in the welcome of Mr. Trump. So now again, it is a very important that currently our Prime Minister is again Narendra Modi, and that side now President Trump is there. And during last many years, India was stretching because India is good friend of Russia, and Russia was in problem in sanctions, and whatever trade relation and defense relation we had, it was suffering because due to sanctions and American pressures, India was not able to take clear decisions, and sometimes it really created a problem in India-Russia stress hours. Okay, and many times Mr. Lavrov came about the oil deal and oil payments. So this kind of things were happening, but I think now Mr. Trump will understand India position and he will cooperate to have good relation with our neighbors and with our best friend in Russia. So as a whole, I feel that India, Russia and America will do cordial work for the benefit of people-centric development, and this tri-party friendship between Russia, India and America will give relief to whole world, because American elections are not only for their people. It is not because other countries' domestic elections are victory of their nation, their leaders and their people. But American elections are different. When American elections, government change, it is an effect on many nations.
Indeed.
On defense, security, trade, and because America policy is America first. Now America need to understand that they have to cooperate with BRICS countries, Global South, and they need to understand the importance of climate change. So all governance system need to reform. And I hope Mr. Trump is a practical person. He has knowledge about economy, trade, and he understands the meaning of friendship. So we are expecting that he will do the equitable development approach to human-centric development. And he will do friendship with all countries without any border or racism or any economic problems.
Okay.
So we are expecting more friendly, equitable development process from American government now.
Okay, thank you so much. Indeed, looking at the agenda that Trump has to unveil, let's look at it from, the domestic point of view with you, Conrad. In your own perspective, given that domestic issues actually led Trump to a victory, the song of victory. So what are those key priorities within the USA that can solidify Trump's leadership this time around?
Yes, I believe that the problem is that is some fundamental contradiction in the Trump politics and ideological agenda. Because from the one point of view, we can see that Trump declarations and Trump promises are based on return to the phraseology of the Reaganomics, the strategy which led to the neoliberal global agenda. But in the same time, Donald Trump, and especially his vice president running mate Vance, proposed some kind of the return to the welfare state as well. Reindustrialization is a concept strongly related to the Fordist memories of the American working class. And we all over the world understand that this dream of the American billionaires that they can rise in power and then they could give something to the middle and working class is just a dream, you know. This theory that all the ships are going up all together is just utopia, it's just neoliberal propaganda. But in the same time, Trump proposal is strongly related to his international strategy, and I absolutely agree with Dr. ENOAKU about that we could judge his policy, Trump's policy, knowing previous 4 years of his policy, but we also had to recognize his declarations. What we know so far, maximizing pressure on Iran, so focusing on the Middle East affairs, and of course strongly supporting Zionist policy in the Middle East. We know so far about some proposals about the, let's say, peace agreement, but in fact rather peace negotiations between Russia and Ukraine, which in fact are kind of prolonging conflict in the Ukraine for 20 years, because Trump proposed just holding NATO membership of Ukraine for 20 years, but still arming Ukraine for this period. So we could be sure that if this proposal would be accepted, that would mean that the Ukrainian war starts again in 20 years. And what we know from the background is this information that a strong supporter of Donald Trump, Elon Musk, asked his companies in Taiwan just to reduce own presence, which suggests that that Musk and his businesses supporting Trump expect some increasing tensions between China and USA again. And we have to remember that any tension, any conflict, and especially any kind of trade war, not mentioning the full-scale war between the West and China, means absolutely no return to the welfare state, because of the, maybe for America, that's the chance for industrialization, but for Europe, and especially for Africa, any global tensions with China could lead to the economical catastrophe.
And of course, those are the things that the world wants to mitigate in the world of multipolarity. And this goes to analyze with you, Mr. Cadogan. Let's look at Trump's austerity stance towards the African continent. We are referring to his first mandate as the U.S. president. Are we anticipating some sort of, more relaxed U.S.-Africa ties? Because when you look at the African leaders that congratulated Trump, we saw the president of Zimbabwe, Emerson Mnangagwa, highlighting that they are looking forward to having some sort of a more mutual, maybe ready, that Zimbabwe is ready to work with the United States of America. And we know that Zimbabwe actually is under U.S. economic sanctions, something which has helped to cripple the economy of that country. So is there room for for this Trump austerity stance to reduce in the world of today?
It's going to be a very difficult one for most African countries, because the USA uses, in general, whether it's the Democrats or the Republicans, Trump or Kamala Harris, for example, if she had won, you'll find that leverage is a very big weapon that they use against their minor allies. So they try and limit the choice, meaning that African countries are going to have to choose whether they have got close ties with China or close ties with the USA. AGOA, the Africa trade agreement with America, is one of the weapons that is used to a certain extent to leverage these kind of relationships. There is the case that is now before the International Court of Justice, which is led by South Africa.
Yeah.
It's going to create a lot of problems for South Africa in the USA-South African relationships, because even under the Democratic or the Democrats' rule, some of the parliamentarians in the USA were starting to put pressure to sever ties with Africa, or rather with South Africa, so that we can let go of that case. And now Trump has got, rather his Republican Party is in the strongest position because they control both houses. So the kind of leverage that they can put against South Africa and some of the other African countries is going to be very severe. And the need for African countries, I believe, is to actually increase manufacturing and stop exporting raw materials and beneficiate most of the resources that Africa has, so that there is less dependence on America. That is the one thing that I can say African countries should do, led by South Africa in this regard.
Okay. Thank you. And in the same perspective with you, Dr. Eddie Ari, we're looking at how Trump coming to the White House can push more patriotic leadership across the African continent. If we're looking at how his stance has always been, and many people are praising him for being too patriotic and putting the interest of America first. You quite mentioned earlier on about how Trump-Africa ties, or maybe U.S.-Africa ties, can be navigated under the historic African continental free trade area. So what, in your own perspective, do you think are those very drastic decisions that have to come from the African side pertaining its ties with the United States of America, especially in line of preserving its natural resources or ensuring homegrown industries that will transform these resources from the natural from even to already finished or semi-finished goods?
We have 4 years of presidency, and this is probably one of the good things when it comes to American politics. It is both long-term and short-term, right? We were talking about 2016 when President Trump came to power. 2016 came to pass, and then we witnessed what happened in 2020, and all of a sudden here we are again, in 2024. With his return, on January 2025. If we remember very well, once at the United Nations General Assembly, President Trump, addressing the United Nations Assembly, and the world, was said that the world and the future belongs to patriots, to leaders who love their countries, but not to globalists. And I believe that, we will continue to witness this kind of rhetoric, or this kind of a philosophy when it comes into that. Speaking maybe from a realist position in there, there's some sort of rationalism that should come at play in it here. I agree with Dr. Elijah when he says that probably it is time for all the African think tanks, those who exist and who are serious, to go back 4 years, right, and analyze what was the U.S.-Africa relation, where did it stand when President Trump was in power. I know that quite a number of things have changed since with the Biden administration. For instance, the U.S.-Africa Sub-Saharan Africa, strategy document that was published in 2022 to try to revamp the U.S.-Africa relation. We are at the time, Clarissa, this is my transition to talk about what the African nation should be doing, and this is what we've been saying all over. There's not going to be anything new. It is a clear opportunity, again, for the African leaders to build on this aspect of patriotism and definitely advance, the Africa agenda in there. Number one is what we mentioned earlier. We know that President Trump is very heavy on trade. We know that he is very heavy on businesses, right? And we know that he will always push this business or this trade agenda from the point of view what will benefit the United States. Number one, from a patriotic point of view. So when you look at the AGOA, which is again the bedrock of the U.S. trade relation with African countries, it is quasi very important for the African leaders to develop. AGOA is set to renew in 2025.
Yeah.
And there has been some preparation, by the outgoing, U.S. Congress for that. And you have quite a number of senators and quite a number of congressmen who are actually in favor of renewing AGOA, in there. What will be the African leaders, positioning in there? I think where there needs to be associating, with the business partners from Africa to understand that is the eligibility criteria. I think we talked about that, earlier. To what extent, a U.S. president, will have this flexibility to strike a country out, reduce or eliminate the eligibility, whereas preserving that because of some changes that you have on the ground. Number one. Number two, I believe that the African civil society organizations and think tanks will have also a clear opportunity here. Why am I dodging the leaders or dodging, the presidents or the government in here? Is because we have also witnessed, we talk about, with the mounting insecurity or mounting constitutional changes in Africa. We have seen that, we are not just talking about, a military regime taking over, but we are also talking about governments, civilian regimes that have captured the states with the applause of many Western countries, right? Yeah. So there needs to be an effort in there to make sure that the incoming Congress understands those kind of things. The third thing I want to mention very quickly and end on that question, as you mentioned that, the president of Zimbabwe, Mnangagwa, was among the first African leaders to congratulate President Trump. This is what the foreign policy is about, because at the end of the day, President Trump is the president-elect of the United States.
Yeah.
Whether people like it or not, he is the president-elect. Whether people in the United States like it or not, he is the president-elect. And we saw the speech that, Kamala Harris, Vice President Harris gave, and we also saw the commitment of the outgoing president, Joe Biden, to ensure that there is a peaceful transition to power. Absolutely. So whatever it is, there's going to be President Trump as the president of the United States from 2025 up to 2029 again. So President Mnangagwa did the right thing to reach out, because Zimbabwe has been under U.S. sanctions for a long period of time, and we know what the sanctions or the kind of suffocation that these sanctions are bringing to this country. That's the right way to go. But it is time, I believe, for the civil society organizations, including trade unions, workers and all that, to rise up and making sure that this new administration will have a better. And there is I'm ending on that, Clarice, very quickly. There is a clear opportunity to do that, because the geopolitical changes that we are talking about here in the world today will not change. Number one is Africa going to represent the continent with the largest number of young people in the world. This is a fact. And now there's a way we are turning in terms of the importance of critical minerals. This is also not going to change, because Trump is in power. So from a geopolitical perspective, again, trade and all that is at stake today. Well, the U.S. Cargill and those companies will continue to import, cocoa from Africa, cocoa from Nigeria, from Cote d'Ivoire, from Ghana. Those things will not change. So where do we play that? These are the three different, dimensions that I gave in there, the role that the civil society organization should be playing in leveraging this incoming administration, and probably the role that the African diaspora itself should also be playing in, of course, working with this new administration that will be in there. Clarissa, I want to lend in there.
Absolutely, which is very imperative for Dr. Eddie in this world with, a more robust nature of geopolitics. We continue to ask how countries or maybe continents are trying to leverage this or position themselves without Africa left behind. And with Trump administration coming, Dr. Elijah ENOAKU, let's shift a bit to the position of the United States of America in the Middle East, which we know that some part of the African continent are already being, affected negatively by the flare in the Middle East. So in terms of, ensuring that there is, an end to the Israeli onslaught on the Gaza Strip and Lebanon. What do you think are those clear defined, or maybe is that clear defined agenda that Trump will bring new, given Trump's, rapprochement with Benjamin Netanyahu?
Ladies and gentlemen, all over Africa, this is a media for us to talk about African affairs. And Clarice, you did ask me a question about the Middle East. I'm going to come back to your question about the Middle East. But being an African, please let me prioritize the issues of African affairs. I will answer your question about the Middle East. But just permit me to talk about Africa, because this is very crucial. We are at a defining moment on the African continent that we can either make or mar our destiny because of what has happened in the United States.
Yeah.
I've listened to all the colleagues on the panel. They've given brilliant ideas about what they think the continent of Africa is going to be going through when it comes to Trump. But like I said, the 4 years of Trump is a recipe for us to diagnose what his next 4 years are going to be. Because if you look at Africa under Donald Trump, when he was in power, talk about the foreign policy of the United States when he was in power has not changed. He's a man that prioritized American first policy. That is what he ran on, and it's not going to change. Why do you see a lot of scramble happening in Africa now in terms of China and Russia and all these other countries that are coming to Africa? It's because the United States literally abandoned Africa, and some of their policies that they had towards Africa, they were completely abandoned under Trump. When you have a policy of American first, where you prioritize American interests in foreign policy, that means that even the Agora that my colleagues talked about a while ago, it was abandoned, literally abandoned. If you look at the percentage of trade, in terms of trade volume between Agora and African countries and the United States in terms of Agora, it was less than 1%. If you go and analyze the data, that trade was less than 1%. But the goal was to increase that trade volume between African countries and the United States. But under Trump, it was less than 1%. That's to tell you that Trump does not prioritize anything else than the interests of the United States. So African countries must take their destiny into their hands. I hear all over Africa, a lot of African countries were jubilating and jumping and say, oh, we have somebody who talks about who's going to drive all the dictators in Africa out of power because he's somebody. Don't be fooling yourself. That is not the foreign policy of Donald Trump. Donald Trump is not interested in democracy in Africa. That is not his goal. He's not going there to come and drive all the dictators that have been in power for more than 20 years, 30 years, and all whatnot. That is not his policy. That's not his goal. So don't kid yourself. Africans need to take their own destiny into their own hands. Number two, let's talk about aid and development, because that is an area that affects a lot of African countries.
Absolutely, yeah.
If you look at the budget proposal of Trump during his 4 years in office, which is a precursor of what's going to happen in the next 4 years. So that's what I'm saying, that we're going to depend on that in order to discuss what's going to happen. If you look at the budget proposal of Donald Trump, he was out to cut everything called foreign aid, including NATO. That's like the linchpin of North American Free Trade Agreement. He was out to cut out everything. So if he's out to cut out even foreign aid to NATO, do you think African countries will become a priority for him to now give aid to African countries or go into aid agreement with African countries? Don't kid yourself, dear Africans. We have to take our destiny into our hands, because that is not going to be his priority, because that's going to raise a lot of concerns when it comes to infrastructure, education, health, or whatnot, and development. We have to make sure that we trade with the United States as equal partner, not somebody expecting somebody to deliver aid to Africa and this. No, Africans need to be aware of that. Now, we talked about trade relations a while ago. I think one of my colleagues mentioned about African Free Trade Agreement. Do you think Donald Trump is going to be in favor of a gigantic African Free Trade Agreement that has, we're going to be controlling about $3.2 trillion of economy? You think that's something Donald Trump is going to foster when somebody is talking about American first? Do not kid yourself. We are going for a very challenging time in Africa. I'm very, very honest. I might sound pessimistic, but the data proves me right. The data that's in front of us proves me right. Look at AGOA. That was supposed to be like the linchpin of the relationship between sub-Saharan African countries and the United States. It was completely decimated under Trump. There was nothing we can show for it out of that. Now, going back to your question, because that deals with terrorism and so on.
Let me come back. Rounding off, with it.
Yes, I want to round up with your question. If you look at what, I am not a fan of Joe Biden or Harris or a fan of Donald Trump. So when I give this analysis, let people not think that I'm thinking of one way or the other, but I'm giving data and statistics based on what we know. If you look at the relationship between the Middle East countries and Joe Biden and Harris, they were playing a balancing act on trying to see that there are not a lot of killings, a lot of issues going on in the Arab world in terms of human loss and so on, and also supporting Netanyahu. But with Trump coming in, I'm telling you, Netanyahu is going to have a free reign to wreak havoc in the Middle East, because he is going to get everything he's going to need from Donald Trump. There is going to be no restraint on his power to do whatever harm he wants to do in the Middle East. We want more peace in the world. We don't want chaos in the world. But when you give somebody that unlimited power to wreak havoc in the United States, look, I am a friend of Israel. I support Israel. I support their goals and their agenda. But I do not support that massive destruction of human life and property. I don't support that. So when you give somebody like that unlimited, unchecked power, that is going to be disastrous to the Middle East process. And I do not believe that Donald Trump believes in a two-state solution for Israel and Palestine living hand in hand together. I don't believe that. I don't know where he stands on that issue. So talking about the Middle East being more peaceful under Donald Trump than what it is right now, I doubt. But I pray that it is not like that. But again, I want to dwell on Africa. African countries should make sure that with Donald Trump in power, they push their interest right to the forefront, whether it is AGOA, whether it's African Free Trade Agreement, whether it's whatever agenda they have on Agenda 2063. If you are waiting that Donald Trump is going to come there and become the rescue of Africa, you are kidding yourself. Okay. It is not going to happen. So let me leave it at that.
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Elijah. I think I will come this time around to you, Conrad. Still looking at the position of the Middle East, do you share the same perspective with Dr. Elijah ENOAKU that Trump would not actually bring about, a permanent ceasefire or, stop to the Israeli onslaught? Because some pundits are actually saying Donald Trump very unpredictable, and he may not give Netanyahu all he wants to mastermind whatever thing his agenda that he has for the Middle East.
Well, I'm afraid that in that point, we could be absolutely clear about the Trump's position. He himself declared as the greatest friend of the Israel in the American presidency history. And I can imagine that even these reactions for the Trump victory in Israel can be visible as understanding Trump's victory as giving free hand to the Netanyahu politics. What we already heard about maximizing pressure on Iran, it could be easily transformed to another missile attack of Israel against Iran. Of course, that will be explained and justified as attack against the nuclear infrastructure in Iran. But we have to understand that, as President Pezeshkian already declared, Iran is ready to return to the table of negotiation and return to restore all the details of the nuclear comprehensive plan. And we have to remember that Trump was the one who declined this project, and even I would say forbidden to American allies, especially European ones, to any kind of softening relations with Iran. So we can expect not only increase of tensions in the Middle East, but we could even worry about a full-scale war there, because despite of what really Donald Trump wants from the Middle East, Benjamin Netanyahu could easily present victory of Trump as a kind of acceptance of the American society to genocide in Gaza, to the aggression against Lebanon, and to the future full-scale aggression against Iran. And African people, if I can only say about it, should always remember that Israel is just that apartheid state, and that the Zionists in the history have been the closest allies of the apartheid regime in the South Africa. And it hasn't changed. This is the same people, the same political power in the Israel who are in charge, and they are interested in the full-scale war in the Middle East and in the global hemisphere, because it's good for the Zionist interest as presented as a strategical allies of the White House of the American people. I'm afraid that is very pessimistic for the Middle East to see the future under the Donald Trump presidency.
Okay. Let's wait to see what agenda he will unveil after taking oath of office, or officially taken on the 20th of January 2025. And still, when we look at what is happening in Europe with you, PURNIMA ARNAND, you know, when Trump emerged victorious, we saw the reaction from many European powers. Actually, there was already a meeting about how they can navigate this phase, given that Trump is very, problematic in taking some certain decisions which are not directly concerned with the United States of America, or maybe with his philosophy of America first. So how do you think Europe can navigate this Trump phase, given that presently there's some sort of disarray in Europe, where you notice that countries are not actually together partnering positions, be it on the Russia-Ukraine crisis or elsewhere, and the role that the Biden administration used to play. Will this be different from, will Trump take a different stance? And if yes, how can this bring about a more, the prospects for the security dynamics in Europe as a whole?
This is important question, and indeed it is very important that now it is very big challenge for America and new president, Mr. Trump, because he has to face many challenges in Europe, because in European countries during last 3 years, they are facing problem due to Ukraine-Russia crisis, because Russia is very important country to supply many important things like oil and gas and chemical fertilizers to Europe. And due to sanctions, many countries having their production problem, like Germany, and recently we saw Hungary was very unsatisfied. Now winter is coming, all European countries need energy. So Biden administration stopped it, and they were trying bilateral other routes to get the oil and gas. Now it is very big question with Mr. Trump that how he will deal with the previous presidential orders. And immediately to change the orders is also not very easy, because it is first need to be resolved Ukraine-Russia crisis, then this sanction matter can be deleted, and they can relieve European organization, European economy, and European business community. So this is very big challenge with American administration now, because immediately resolving Russia-Ukraine crisis is not easy. If he is resolving immediately with some action, then NATO is there. And to unsatisfy NATO is also not easy, because weapon industry is there. And America leads very important sector in the weapons. So it's not easy. And another side, as our other colleagues said about Africa and Middle East. So these points are also very important, because in Africa, China is very active, and African people are doing MSME and small enterprises for upcoming their GDP. Okay, and China is giving very good support. Like a few months ago, they give $50 billion, and they are supporting infrastructure projects at very highest level. So it is a competition for America. Okay, and they are having trillion of dollars deficit. So it is not very easy to Mr. Trump to compete with all these challenges and to feel the expectation of Europe, Asia, Africa, or Russia and Middle East. So this is very challenging for him, and I hope with the cooperation, as we said in the BRICS, problems are everywhere. All governments need funds. All countries have jobs deficit, okay, and they need opportunities. They need new projects to give employment to the people and youth. And there is a food problems also. Yeah. So big challenges are there. And how we will fulfill? Without people cooperation, we cannot do. At government levels, we cannot do. Governments are having a limitation. Okay. Under that limitation, they have to work because their budgets are limited, and this limited budget they have to expand everywhere. How it is possible? So if we are expecting something very big, it is our mistake. And I think that it is needed to reform, relocate the financial system and strategies of American government. Yeah. It is not easy because new reforms can give little relief to Europe that yes, something is happening in their favor. Otherwise, everybody is thinking that how we can save our economy, how we can satisfy our people, because Europe is also having to democracy and they have to satisfy their people, and their democratic system is very clear. Their votings are limited. For 2, 3, 4 votes, they can drop. Okay, so it is very tough there. And you need always to give answer to your people. In Europe, people and government and digital system is very good. So it is very difficult for the European governments and Mr. Trump to satisfy all countries. And inside Europe also, they are having their border problems and trade relation problem, currency problem. So how these problems will be resolved? This is a question. But we feel with the, and we feel think that if we will take equitable rights and people to people participation, okay, then it can give some roadmap to get the solutions by reforming their policies.
Indeed, it's about policies set in place or put in place, and how these policies, be it internal or foreign policies, do affect the rest of the world. And we are looking at the economic trajectory of the African continent with you, or Good News CADOGAN. When a country like the US comes to the fore and people are actually analyzing on how it will affect the standing, they are standing particularly in various aspects, including politics, economy, and the others. We want to look at how, with all of these changes happening along political, social, or even economic lines, can push the African continent in its quest to have a clear economic trajectory and a more, financial standing, especially when it comes to international trade. What lessons can we learn from Trump's philosophy of U.S. first to translate it to Africa first, in terms of having a voice in the economy, global economy, and how this can, directly affect its economic agenda?
There is not much to learn directly from Donald Trump. But one thing I can give to him is that he's a good communicator, he's a good orator. That's the quality that already exists on the continent. He has worked on the primal fears of his people, the primal sadness of the middle class in America, and the primal anger against globalization and the export of manufacturing capacity into other geographies. In Africa, we suffer from the same. We have not broken our colonial links. In fact, the old colonial value chains of driving extractive economies on the continent have not shifted at all. We still take ore out of the ground, food production out of the ground into Europe. It gets beneficiated there, it comes back as expensive products. So we are not really adding much value. And as a result, instead of having a resource blessing as a continent, we have a resource curse. And that resource curse is coming as a result of poor leadership. We need peace in Africa. We need to silence the guns in Africa, as in yesterday. We need good health policies on the continent. We need to increase food production so that we do not depend on other parts of the world for food production. We need to diversify our trade partners so that in the end, we don't have a single relationship with a single trading bloc, so that we can be able to be more independent, to be really free economically as a continent. We need to start creating centers of excellence across the continent, where certain products and certain ores are beneficiated in certain parts of Africa. But to diversify like that, again, it comes back to the issue of peace, the issue of governance, the African peer review mechanism that was devised by the African Union, fewer signatories to that. So there is still havoc insofar as political philosophy is concerned on the continent. And lastly, we need to increase the power of the African bloc as a trader, so that in the end, we trade on our terms. We don't trade on Chinese terms. We don't trade on European terms or American terms, but on the basis of Agenda 2063, revamped such that it serves the needs of Africans. I support Elijah here when he says Africa must be prioritized. If we are not going to prioritize Africa, we are not going to get anywhere. So by setting up great trading policies and also trading agenda to support the people of Africa, the 1 billion people, and to make jobs available to the young Africans who are unemployed today. Those are the things that we should be pursuing.
Indeed, leveraging the scope to ensure human capital development across the African continent, and this boils on how the world can navigate, changes that will come in terms of the leadership and how this will affect the global power dynamics. With you, Dr. Eddie Eric, on the area of global, maybe geopolitical alliances. And you were talking about, the stakes of geopolitics in contemporary society. And given these major changes which have occurred in the 21st century, that has been characterized by, a new philosophy of a more practical, multipolar world that will bring about an end to Western hegemony. How will Trump's presidency reshape alliances, or how should it reshape alliances with other key players of the world? Let's be particular with, the BRICS bloc and other, organizations that have impact on global politics, economics, and even people-to-people diplomacy, as underlined earlier on by PURNIMA Anand.
I want to start by one of the statements that President-elect Trump made on the campaign trail, especially during the only debates that he had with Vice President Kamala Harris. When asked the question about the situation in Ukraine, I mean, the Russian-Ukrainian, war, and even the Middle East, he said that, he will stop it, right? If, as a president, he will stop that war. So, as we take him, to his own word, another thing that the Republicans have also wrote on during the time of the campaign is the fact that, under President Trump, the full-blown, out-scale, wars that, we see in Europe today, and the situation in the Middle East, did not take place, right? Yeah. President Trump also referenced, the quick and emergent, ousting of the U.S. troops from Afghanistan at the time, which led to this debacle that we saw, and also sparked a lot of controversy within here. So, if I want to bank on what he said about stopping the war in there, it is already a reorientation of his geopolitical interest for the United States in terms of a relationship that will be built. One thing that I want to remain sure about is his stance, about NATO, as I'm sure that he will come back again and talk about the United States cannot continue to be the only one or the major supplier of NATO. Yeah. Only the European countries, were responsible for their own security and also for investments in security in that region. This is what I am seeing when it comes to that side of the world. Of course, President Trump has been said to be very close to President Vladimir Putin, and I'm sure that a conversation between the two will start, as they will come to some sort of a table to have a conversation about, how this war in the Ukraine, with all of its impact, can come to an end. But at the same time, also banking on what Dr. Elijah said earlier, it is time. If we have a country such as South Africa that has been very big on the situation in the Middle East, and even taking, Israel to the International Criminal Court, for instance, all of these are diplomatic efforts actually to stop the genocide, or to stop, the bloodshed that we are seeing in the Middle East today, which also is having quite a number of impact, some impact on what the rest of the world is dealing with. Let us not forget that, as we talked about this, one of the dimensions is the migration corridors that we see. How many African immigrants, African workers are going to the Middle Eastern countries to work today? We have heard, for instance, of so many of them, were complaining of the fact that they've been locked up, were in the houses by their employers in Lebanon, for instance, when bombs start, were really in there. So one way or another, there is some sort of a direct or indirect correlation with what will happen with Africa and the Africans. Mm-hmm. In terms of these alliances, as we talked about, listen, it is either the United States that initiates, or it can also be as if we want to follow the marching order. And I did that, I say that in a very joking and pleasant way that Dr. Elijah reminded us of. We are Africans, and we are looking at what, Africa might benefit, and also countries of the South, from this Trump coming back to power in India. If we look at that, from that perspective, I think in terms of geopolitical, alliances in here, the main question, Clarice, for me is, can the African countries, even with their interests with other foreign powers in this multipolar world that is developing more and more, can they afford to forfeit any serious, impactful, beneficial relationship with the United States today? Mm-hmm. The answer to that question, we have not heard the President Cyril Ramaphosa telling, President Biden at the time during their meetings, even though the United States was scolding South Africa for its policy when it comes to Russia, when it comes to participating in the BRICS, when it comes to what is happening in the Middle East. We have not heard President Ramaphosa saying we are cutting ties with the United States. We have not heard even the countries of the Sahel, members of the Association of Sahel countries, saying we are cutting ties with the United States, for instance. Can they afford to do it? The answer is no. But can they actually use that opportunity to mold, revamp, reshape their relationship with the United States in a more beneficial way for them? That's the question that we need to answer, and that's where things come in there. That's where these new young people that are reflecting, will come in there. And I'm going to end on that question that as we look at that, earlier I did mention civil society organization. He was going to take all of those again, because the number of young people today in the countries of the Sahel, for instance, that have pushed and are supporting the ousting of French troops or other European troops, for instance, are the same one who, many of them, are negotiating what we call the migration channels. One of the key interesting in here will be what President Trump, is proposing, mass deportation, which of course is arousing here in the United States a large, in the African or the immigrant community in general, to prepare to react to what that will be, what might be. What will be the consequences? What will be the ways in which this is seen on the continent as well, with this mass of young people in there? This is also, as we talk about the work, I think trying to put everything together in here, this is what I see as, again, clear opportunities for me, right, for the African countries to reshape, revamp their relationship with the United States, in the next 4 years to come. One thing for sure, they cannot forfeit those relationships. But another thing is that if there is any clear opportunity with this abandonment again of Africa, as we saw, and as Dr. Elijah reminded us, earlier under President Trump, it means that, the BRICS countries, for instance, will have another clear opportunity to increase their presence in Africa. Can the United States very definitely afford that? My question, or my answer to that question, is even with Trump, no, they cannot do that. This is the reason why we have seen under the Biden administration this revamp strategy to go in there. Whether it has been implemented or whether it has produced what it was supposed to be producing, this is left to another a series or another show to analyze for us as we help certainly our African countries to shape and revamp their policy vis-a-vis the United States. So in terms of a broad geopolitical perspective, this is what I see. The United States will continue to be a prime destination of immigration. This is key when it comes to a geopolitical analysis in here. It is going to continue to be a key destination for many Africans who are migrating or immigrating outside of the continent. We have not seen, the last time I saw the look at the statistics from the Migration Policy Institute, I do not see any trend, being curved down, but more and more will come, even with the threat that they will have mass deportation. And in 4 years, Dr. Elijah and my brothers and sisters in here, I don't know how an administration, even as powerful as it is, can deport, almost, 12 million people that are said to be undocumented.
And of course, some complexities. Dr. Elijah ENOAKU, you may want to comment to the viewpoint of Dr. Eric Eddy pertaining the stakes of the global geopolitical alliances, especially with the Trump's position on so many aspects.
Yeah, sure. But I want to continue to stick to the African issues. Ladies and gentlemen, we could sit here, we could have another conference, and I'll talk to you about European relationship with Trump for the whole day. I could talk to you about BRICS for the whole day. But I want to prioritize African issues so that we understand how the election of Donald Trump is going to affect our people back home. Now, my good friend, I think from Kenya, Mr. Good News, I suppose he's from Kenya, did mention
South Africa,
my brother. My apology. We're all African. Whether South Africa or Kenya, we are one. Yeah. God bless you. So the point I was trying to make is he highlighted a couple of things, and also what Dr. Eddy also highlighted, which I want to pick on as well. He highlighted we in Africa, we need to stop the guns blazing. We need peace. We need trade. We need this. But again, I am not being pessimistic. I am going by the numbers. I'm going by the data. I'm going by the statistics. I'm going by the evidence that we have on the ground. Mm-hmm. During the term of Donald Trump, in Africa, we have 35 conflicts that were happening on the continent of Africa. Out of the 55 countries, 35 countries were in conflict in one way, either internal or external, or some sort of upheavals going on. Yeah. Donald Trump intervened in zero. When I say intervene, I'm not saying sending troops. I just mean trying to see how the peace can return to those countries in one fashion or the other. As the world power that the United States is, Donald Trump intervened in zero of those conflicts. That's data, that's evidence, so that we can understand what it is going to happen in its next 4 term, and also understand that we need to take our destiny into our own hands. Number 2, my colleague talked about trade. Let us understand that Donald Trump was elected on the worst instincts of the American people. He dwelt on their fears. He dwelt on their worst fears. He dwelt on, I don't want to go on with the litany of things that he dwelt on that highlighted the fears of the American people. So during his reign, his goal is to make sure that he can meet some of those fears and play into it and make sure that he can meet some of those needs. And how is he going to do it? He is not going to do it by coming on to support global trade like the African Free Trade Agreement that my colleague talked about. Donald Trump is a unilateral figure. He likes to deal with countries on an individual basis. He's not a globalist. He doesn't. So for African countries to ever think that Donald Trump is going to be someone who comes in to foster global trade on the continent of Africa, like we are talking about African Free Trade Agreement, please lower your hopes. Africa should take its destiny into its hands. My colleague talked about, rounding up a lot of people in Africa, in the United States, and sending them back home. That's a discussion for a different day. That's not a discussion for this film. I want to leave that out because that's the whole thing. If I want to start talking to you about it, we'll take the whole day here.
Yeah.
But again, let's dwell on things that we as Africans, we've seen working in our favor over the years that we might be concerned that might be taking us backward. Let's talk about the climate policy, for example. We saw that African countries mustered a huge effort on the global conference that took place, I think in Egypt, and the other one that took place in Paris.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of discussion that African countries do not pollute. We do not have the industry that pollute. So the Western countries that are doing a lot of pollution should be able to, support efforts in Africa that will gear towards reducing the global impact of climate change. Therefore, African countries are going to benefit from a lot of funding that will go to afforestation, irrigation, and a lot of efforts that were going on. And these countries in the West were already signing onto this agreement, global climate agreement, so that African countries can benefit from it. But as we speak, we all know Donald Trump withdrew from the Paris Agreement.
Sure.
He is not a believer in the climate change movement. He's not. So African countries must be ready to understand that his policies are going to affect us in one way or the other negatively, and we must be ready to take the bull by the horns and handle our own economy, handle our own diplomacy in order to make sure that we do not become a forgotten lot because our policies were too tied to the United States. And therefore, the United States is abandoning Africa because that's what's happening. The Biden administration was trying to, gather the pieces from where Trump left over. But now Trump is back to power.
Yeah.
Where are we going? What's the direction of Africa? Again, I might sound pessimistic, but my discussion is based on facts, is based on numbers that we have on the ground, that we can rely and say, this is what he did in his 4 years. If he's continuing that policy, which is what we saw during his campaign, that he wants to continue the policies that he had, whether you're talking about climate change, you're talking about terrorism, you're talking about the guns, stopping the guns blazing, stopping about issues that affect us in Africa, those are not the things that Donald Trump is interested in.
Indeed.
Donald Trump would rather prefer to deal with Kenya as a country rather than deal with African Free Trade Agreement. Donald Trump would prefer to deal with South Africa as a country rather than deal with the whole of African conglomerate. But that is not the direction Africa wants to go. Africa wants to play on the big stage as a bloc, but he is not a promoter of bloc agreements because he knows that if he wants to trade with Africans as a bloc, Africa has more potential and more power because you're dealing with 3.2 trillion economy.
Okay.
Unable to defeat them. But he will come in, try to use carrots in one country or the other, play around, make African countries divided so that he can get what he wants. Now, I don't know how much time I have.
Just be rounding off, please.
Okay. I want to round up by saying this, Clarice. There is hope. There is hope on the African continent. Because if the African continent comes together under a bloc and wants to pressure the United States to play together as a bloc, they have a lot of potential to do that.
Okay.
If they want to just leave everything and say, we have China, we have this country coming in, we know what China is doing when it comes to the predatory loans on the continent of Africa. It is not a strategy that is sustainable. Yes, we can deal with China, we can deal with these countries, but we cannot outsource our economy, our diplomacy, and everything and say, if the United States is not coming in, we're just going to let China run the show.
No.
It is also a disastrous policy, because we have seen that on the continent of Africa, that China means good for Africa, but they give aids and loans with a lot of strings attached.
Absolutely.
So I will end by saying, let the Africans take their own destiny into their own hands. Trump or not Trump, Africa must be able to stand by itself, come together, work as a bloc. India is there. India has an open door policy for African countries.
Okay,
and
Dr.
some of their
Dr.
policies
ENOAKU,
work towards Africa.
Yes, thank you so much. I think we will actually have subsequent programs to elucidate more on the very vital points that you have highlighted while we go again to get the viewpoint of Purnima and Nana on this Trump's philosophy of thinking as one without globalizing, how it's affecting international relations in present day society, and even the concept of globalization. And I also appreciate Purnima if you throw more light on the future of NATO, patterning Trump's stance and America's contribution to this alliance. Hello, Purnima.
She's muted.
Please.
Yes.
Okay.
My mute speaker was mute. So now you can hear me audible?
Yes, you're audible now.
Okay. So NATO is very important now, and NATO is facing, high pressure, because NATO policy and NATO think tanks, they are waiting that how America will take further action, because NATO is expanding, and in which countries NATO expanded, they are also in risk if when NATO will go back, because now there is no question for the NATO expansion, because BRICS is very strong and BRICS countries will not allow any further expansion. And BRICS countries and other nations want that NATO should be finished. It should be closed. And this is a very important question for new presidency, that how they will handle NATO. Because NATO is existing, that means that you have to give them funds, you have to give them weapons, you have to give them borders to fight. And if we are giving borders, we are shedding our blood, our children's, our future. So prosperity and development cannot be imagined with NATO. So we need to, a whole world voice is that NATO should be stopped and closed, because we don't need NATO. And we don't have problem, because every border problem ultimately either by, after fight or before fight can be resolved on table and by dialogue. So this is all India is trying to say to whole world. We need peace and we need dialogue, and we don't need NATO. So America should think on it, and very important decision need to be taken by the American new presidency. And it is a very big challenge for President Trump.
Yeah, it's indeed a big challenge for President Trump, President-elect of the United States of America. And while talking about Trump's standing in the Middle East, we want also to look at him promising that if during his campaigns, one of the sessions, he said if elected, he will end the war in Ukraine. And when we listen keenly to the points already advanced by some of you on the panel, we begin to see that Trump, according to your opinion, Trump has the interest of ending the war in Ukraine, but that is not the situation in the Middle East. And it brings us now to how the major strategies or feasible strategies that Trump can use to end this war in the Eastern Europe that has divided even the European Union with their different positions. Countries feeling the negative effect of such sanctions on Russia, and they're already feeling it on the economy, bringing about some sort of division. So now Trump coming as that, the figure that has promised to end the war in Europe with you, Konrad. What strategies do you think he can use that will be more practical rather than what we have seen in the days, maybe as leaders continue to try to put an end to cessation of hostilities in that area?
Yeah, I think that's a part of the wider strategy, the Trump strategy and his vision of the European-American relations in general. We should remember that, for example, during his first term in office, Trump, let's say, came to the United Kingdom and said, okay, turn away from Europe. We prioritize our relationship with you. You are our first strategic ally in Europe. And okay, then we, as we know, Britons voted for the Brexit. They expected any kind of prioritization of the American-British relations. And after that, what Trump really did, that was increasing 25% tariffs on Scottish whiskey. Mm-hmm. Then Trump came to Europe and said, okay, turn away from the from China, turn away from the relations, trade relations with Russia. We could easily replace Russian natural gas with Qatar and Saudi and American LPG. Okay, Europeans started to turn away from China and Russia, and then USA under Trump increased tariffs on the European motor industry. You can expect exactly the same politics of Trump toward, for example, African-China relations. They propose to turn away from other directions, not offering you anything to compensate it. That's the first. Speaking about the war, of course, you have to remember that you can end the war in very different ways. Mm-hmm. And we can equally expect in Europe that would be decreasing of American involvement in the Ukrainian war, but at the expense of the European countries. Trump could easily repeat his orders to increase military spend more than 4.5% of its budget for military spending. Trump would like all European countries to increase military spending. Is it the politics of peace? I don't think so. It could be easy to think about Ukrainian war continuing, but paid by Europeans. So again, we have to also remember that yes, Trump could present his vision as some kind of return to the concert of powers. Yeah. So deciding of the global affairs, but the main actors, of course, with the still leading role of the United States. And I think that is very crucially important for the Europeans, but even more for the Africans. So to become superpower, Africans should become the superpower to be a partner, to be recognized actor of this global chess mate. Because without that, that will be still just another call for the American hegemony. Mm-hmm.
Talking about American hegemony and how the countries and blocs, particularly the BRICS, have been trying to bring about an end to Western hegemony in terms of economic dominance and otherwise. With you, Good News, Cadogan, we're looking at should Trump focus on more on resolving domestic issues that, something that actually led to his victory. How can this, give more impetus to other global powers like Russia to, while Trump is trying to shift U.S. Foreign policy, Russia and other global powers can capitalize on this shift to make the scope for more multipolar world and even for the BRICS more fertile and larger for the world to navigate and implement the policies that will bring a more solid face to globalization in the 21st century.
It's going to give a lot of leeway to Putin, for example, to present something that is going to be attractive to Trump. And that would also not dent the image of America as a leader of the developed world, so to speak, or of the free world, as they call themselves. Yeah. So Trump needs to hear from Putin that he is prepared for peace. He's prepared to stop the war, and he has got something to give so that America can also save face amongst its NATO allies. If then there can be that give and take, and America and NATO are prepared to actually move back probably to 2014 lines and reduce the pressure on Russia in terms of its own fears of an invasion by having NATO on its doorstep. This is a very big challenge because then it means the Ukrainians will have to accept something less than what they went in with into the war, and they will have to actually face the burden of having to rebuild their country, the economy and everything else that they have lost. And if America and or NATO are not able to support that development, that proposal is not going to be acceptable. In the Middle East, it's a lose-lose situation because America is not prepared to back down in terms of its support for the Zionist agenda in the Middle East. So there may not be a solution there unless there are other pressures exerted in the region whereby maybe Iran and other countries are able to pressure for a two-state solution so that in the end the Palestinians can gain the freedom that they need and also live alongside in peace with the Israelis. In Africa, there is an opportunity for Africa to change the way in which it sees herself. Leadership in Africa in general has been looking at a parent-child kind of relationship between America and the continent. We need to wake up to the dynamics of geopolitics so that in the end, we are able to stand up for what is good for Africa as the leaders of Africa, and not only look at trade with USA, because that is not, it's a continuation of the past. We need to look at trading within and the continent and also trading to an alternative, not necessarily the USA. USA is not the only market that we can export our things to. Sure. We need to break the colonial ties with the other powers so that in the end we can be able to actually do the right thing for our people, and also improve domestic politics so that migration on the continent is by choice and not in protest or as a response to persecution. Peace is key as a response to the abandonment that will happen with the Trump internally focused kind of political agenda.
talking about a political agenda and how countries can navigate the Trump administration or advantages of the Trump administration towards defining its own scope. With you, Dr. Eddie Eric, if I can continue from where Mr. Cadogan ended, we are looking at you're quite conversant with the politics of the United States of America, as well as the political scope of African countries. Do you think the existing political system in Africa presents it, a more opportunity to capitalize on the changing geopolitical dynamics, to be able to maybe from there take what benefits or what is important to the African continent that will in turn solve the problem of migration and others faced mainly by the vibrant young African population?
The answer to that question is a vibrant no, and I will be ending on that, right? Simply because the number of migrants, the stats that we are seeing, countries such as Cote d'Ivoire, Ghana, Kenya, Malawi, and others becoming, major suppliers of migrant workers or young people, young women, taking all these migration, corridors to North America or even to the Middle Eastern countries today. All of those things are the result, right, of internal politics that basically do not, offer clear chances or clear opportunities for these young people, whether they are educated or they're not educated, whether they are educated with the standard norms or receiving a professional education. So I do not see there is a quite of inadequacy between, again, the educational system that we see, the politics that are in place, and what will drive these people. Our brother from South Africa said that, hopefully that migration in the future from Africa is not going to be by force, but by choice. Unfortunately, we see a lot of migration today by force. It can be, because of economic, pressure. It can be because of the inflation that the countries have not been able to mitigate or provide. When we see what is happening in Nigeria, in Ghana, in those countries that have a spark of mass protest of people, countries, where reaction or government reaction has been, or those protests have been met with what? Fees, determined reaction by police authorities. In Nigeria, even some young people were condemned for treason and for subversion, activities. Trade union leaders were arrested, were beaten, were accused of plotting with foreign intelligence to overthrow the government. Those kind of policies in place. And to add on to that also, as we continue to talk about how our elections, for instance, are run, there is always, and there is continuation of a discontent with the political systems that are in place in these different countries. So I believe, again, to answer your question, Clarissa, that it is no. And I'm going to second, the ideas that our brother from South Africa, gave earlier in terms of what needs to be done inside. There is a discrepancy between what political elites today can say and their reaction to what is happening today in the United States with the re-election of President Trump, compared to what, what these young people, will be saying, whether they're in the street or they're not in the streets. And that takes a whole lot of different things, even including, life and choice of values and everything that, you may name or you may identify in here. When you look at what is happening in the Sahel countries, again, with the support of these young people, right, clearly siding with their government, it is a way different from what the Afrobarometer, for instance, may be telling you about how young people are reacting to the issue of democracy today in the continent. Yeah. The latest statistic that I read indicates clearly that more than 50% of the young people that have been polled by the Afrobarometer in about 8 or different African countries will tell you that they envision to live in countries where there is a freedom of choice, freedom of association. Basically, they believe in what we call a democracy. Okay. But they just do not like the ways in which they don't believe in the fact that, whatever elections are organized, lead them to put into power people who can actually deliver the promises of the democracy that they believe in. All of those things put together, Clarice, continue to drive this immigration, whether it is for economic reasons, for political reasons, or for many other reasons as well. I believe that, the African countries working on that internally, locally, nationally, number one, and number two, buckling up with their regional priorities will put them in a better position to deal with the other powers, whether it is the European powers, the North American powers, or the Eastern European powers. I want to end on that question, Clarice, very quickly by saying that I'm happy that earlier our brother, Dr. Elijah, ended his comments by a note of hope, saying that it beholds to the African countries to get ready and prepare themselves to deal with the Trump presidency. But I want to say that I do not see whether Trump is a big, internationalist, a patriot. I do not see, honestly and concretely, even with a reduction or with an oblivion of what the African continent may represent, I do not see the United States forfeiting, right, its presence in Africa, which will be very detrimental to them, right? So whatever Trump's position may have been in the past 4 years, not that I want to remain, very optimistic, but I'm saying that for the African countries in general, it is a clear, or there is going to be a clear opportunity to create and reinvent the U.S.-Africa relations that they can drive based on the shifts and the changes that what we are seeing in the world today. At the end of the day, we are talking about 4 years.
Sure.
What may come after the Trump in there is something that I just wanted to end on that, but again to reassert that I was happy to hear our brother Elijah ending on the note of a hope with regard to what the African countries should be doing, and the agency should be on them more this time, and that's what we've been saying all over our shows with you, either on Africa Media, on this new channel, or wherever we've been. Africa should drive its own agenda. Federico Mayor said that, at the turn of the century, I don't know where we are doing it or where we are not doing it, but, I wanted to end on that one. Sorry for taking a little bit longer than expected. Sorry.
Which is very imperative for Africa driving its own agenda, as the U.S. is driving its own agenda, as particularly under Trump. We want to see how the global world can, actually bring out a more clear agenda for the world of multipolarity. We're going to end today's session with you, Dr. Elijah ENOAKU. When we are listening to all of these debates across the globe patterning Trump's position, which is yet to be unveiled after the election victory, we want to look at the aspect where some people said if Trump is unable to put an end to the war in Eastern Europe or maybe in the Middle East, it can led to a third world war, and now some people have been explaining why Trump will be on a nuclear weapon will be on Trump's agenda. Let's take it from the African perspective, given that other countries across the globe are actually preparing defense, security, and other measures to ensure that the come and in phase with the changes positively. Is there hope for Africa to think of its own nuclear weapon? Should there be an escalation that will engulf the whole of the world? Though there is hope, like you've said, that of course peace will return.
I think you're just making the day for Mr. Ashir. That's the question he's been asking me, that I should talk about if Africa should look forward to having their own nuclear weapon. You haven't been able to feed your people. People are dying of starvation. There's no education, but you can't. That's a misplaced priority right there. That's a misplaced priority. Africa should not be thinking about nuclear weapon at this time, because nuclear weapon is a deterrent. And I do not think the problem in Africa is because somebody is trying to come in there and wipe the whole of Africa. Therefore, we need a deterrent in order to prevent them from doing so. I think the problem we have, it's not an issue of threats from the foreign powers. problem we have is that we do not have equitable economic engagement with foreign powers. We do not. Right now, the world is going into a frenzy, crazy search for lithium in order to power the new sustainable economy, sustainable world that we are talking about batteries, we're talking about new electric cars, electric this, and cell phones and all whatnot. The minerals that is supposed to be used to engage or develop those technologies are in Africa. Pick anyone, and I will tell you the percentage of what Africa has in terms of the minerals that the world needs right now. So Africa has a very powerful position from where they can work on in terms of making sure that they are heard, you know, in terms of trade volume, in terms of engaging with the other powers. So Africa has everything they need to act on the big scene and push the agenda forward. I mean, there is no, United States is not going to come to any African country and force them that we have to be the one to, you know, develop your lithium. We have to be the one to develop your petroleum industry. We have to be the one. African countries have to come together and present an agenda with rules that say that before you produce this, you know, one of my colleagues was talking about, you know, lack of value in terms of what Africa produces. Why is there lack of value? It's because we produce all these things and send them out as raw materials. We don't add any value to it. But is there any power out there, Western world, you know, try to pressure us that we must do this? We have the power to say no. Before we send out cocoa, for example, we must finish it into some sort of chocolate before we send it out there. Before we send out iron, we must finish it in some way. Before we send out these minerals, we must add value to it. So Africa has everything they need to play strong on the global stage. The fact is, we are so divided, we are so, you know, we are not acting as a bloc, and therefore we do not have that pressure to bear on the international scene. Now, let me just say something on what my friend Dr. Eddie mentioned there about it was just 4 years, and this one is just going to be 4 years. That is very true, but the implication of what they are going to do within that 4 years go beyond those 4 years. Look at what Trump did within those 4 years. He came in with tariffs and all whatnot. When Joe Biden came in, a lot of those tariffs are still in place today because they became popular with the American population in such a way that he could not take it off. So whether 4 years or 8 years, his policies will have an impact globally. And Africans should be ready to make sure that we can play strong, play on our own turf. For example, if we are going to be dealing with the United States, we have our own areas where we are strong. Africa can be very strong on agriculture. Let's work with the United States so that they can bring the technology that they have. Let's work with China so that they can bring the technology that they have. Russia, and say, we want to play on the agricultural front. We know that that's our strength. We have 30% of the world's arable land that is in Africa. You don't need any fertilizer, and you just plant your crops and they're going to grow. We're going to play strong on that one. Let's go on that. What about infrastructure? We have a poor network of infrastructure in Africa, where we can produce the goods, but if the goods do not get to the market, we are not going to be competitive.
Okay.
We produce a lot of things, but we're not competitive because they're being sold in the local market. Why don't we work on that and say, the Western world, we can work together. We are going to give you the minerals, we're going to give you the petrol, we're going to give you the lithium, but you must help us develop our infrastructure so that we become competitive in the world. Indeed. Recently, we heard about Niger, for example, that is selling their uranium to the Western world at a meager amount. Nothing at all. Almost zero. I can't remember the last percentage that I saw. But so these are things that we have the potential, we have the power to play on. It's not like somebody's going to force us. So again, I want to end on a very optimistic note that we do not want to use the little resources that we have and say we want to build a nuclear weapon in order to threaten the Western world. What are we threatening them for? Let's build on what we have, the strength that we have, so that before we sit on the table, we're going to present our agenda, take or leave it. If the United States says no, we're going to play with China. China says no, we're going to play with Russia. India is there. There are many countries that need these minerals. So we have a lot of opportunity ahead of us that we can work to build on our strength and make sure that we're competitive on the global stage. We don't need to go nuclear. We don't need to be confrontational with the United States. They are not going to be our enemies, and they will never be our enemies. But we need to play strong. We need to play strong.
Indeed, it's about navigating the international scope or sphere strategically and seeing how you can review or maybe bring forth policies or diplomacy that will encourage a more, positive notes in line with economic, economic development, like the foreign minister of India stated lately that with the BRICS and other, organizations, it is to ensure that global development occurs at, at almost the same level, so people can benefit from it. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for the insight on our topic for discussion this day. While waiting to see the clear agenda, which is now away from the pre-election agenda of President Donald Trump, and how this is going to affect the lines of international relations in this more globalized world. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for trusting the Pan-African Television, and do have a lovely weekend in the company of programs on For You Media Africa.